Welcome to the Erie Wellness Podcast, your go-to source for all things health, wellness, and living your best life right here in Erie. I'm your host, Lauren Brunetti, and I'm so excited to have you here. Each episode will dive into conversations with local experts and wellness professionals who are making an impact in the world of health and well-being. Before we jump in, be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. We love hearing from you and seeing our community grow. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone. I am so excited for today's conversation because let's be real, there's nothing like that good feeling after an organizing session. But have you ever wondered why clearing out clutter feels so good? And more importantly, how do we actually keep up with it when life is already full of to-dos? Sometimes organizing feels like just another thing to add to the list. To help us answer these questions, I'm thrilled to welcome Sarah from A Little Less to the Erie Wellness Podcast. With a background in psychology and a strong understanding of how our surroundings impact our well-being, Sarah brings a mix of her Midwestern work ethic, empathy, and a practical approach to organization. Her company, A Little Less, is all about liberating you from clutter, whether it's creating a customized system for your home, helping with full life management, or offering full service move support to reduce stress during big transitions. Because as Sarah says, less mess equals less stress. I can't wait to dive into the psychology behind organizing, why it feels so good, and how to actually keep up with it. Let's get started and welcome Sarah.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to dive into all of this. Let's go.
Let's go. I know you spent some time in the corporate world before becoming a professional organizer. What inspired you to make this switch, and how did you get into this line of work?
So it kind of starts back from like my early years. I grew up in like a very organized home. I think it's just, I think it's ingrained in me. I'm sure there's like some genetics that show like people that are a little bit on the organized spectrum, I guess. But it's just something that came natural to me. It's an environment that was very much instilled at a young age. So I do think environment played a very big part in that. And then naturally, it was just something that I was just drawn to. So obviously growing up and, looking for a job, I found something that, kind of fit those needs and skill sets. And after getting my degree in psychology, I just, I really wanted to work with people. And so I worked in the corporate world, administrative assistant, managing people, policy and procedures. So again, kind of put myself in these boxes of organization for corporate side of things. And, I realized like during all of this, I was in corporate for 20 years. I loved what I did. I loved working with people. I loved coming up with systems and solutions for the employees to make better efficient use of their time and work, product, was a better output that way. And I just knew I needed to do something more with that. I knew I needed to be working with people hand in hand. I knew I needed to just have a bigger outreach, and I wanted to be personally, I just wanted to personally, affect people in a way that was life-changing. And so I would say like my inspiration comes from a lot of things, but, I think at heart, I really am a people person. I am fascinated by how people operate. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to understand your pain points. I want to understand your history. Why did you get to the place you're at now? And, what are the struggles you're having that might come naturally to me, where we all have varying skill sets. Mine sits over here, but I'm not very good at other things. But how can I help you kind of bridge that gap where you're feeling that need for from extra help, or a need for, just extra input on things. And so, my inspiration, kind of comes from when my mom sent me the last box of American Girl doll stuff. I love her to death. She saved all these amazing things for my kids, but I didn't have the room for it. And I was just like, it's just an overwhelming sense of like, where am I supposed to put this? And I already was very organized with the items that my children played with. And that was already a second job, basically, just keeping everything in order. So I just kind of sat there and I was like, gosh, if I feel this way and I'm already a fairly organized person, I can't imagine someone that has a feeling of disorganization and a feeling of chaos and a feeling of overwhelm, who doesn't have the time or the skill sets or the ideas or a partner to help them get to a place of feeling that calm and serenity, I guess you could say. And so it was just kind of during that moment where, I was still working my full-time job, and I just decided, like, I've got to find people that need this help. And so I just kind of started doing outreach in Erie, and, found some people that, somebody's parents had passed away. And so I was like, let me come help clear out their things with you. And let's walk through this process together. And it's such a personal thing to let someone come into your home and touch your items and ask questions, and so I realized that over time that really the personal connection was the most important for me, which is again what filled the bucket of what I was looking for when I made that corporate switch. So I think that kind of answers some of those questions.
Yes, that is so good. And I feel like there is so much to all of our stuff and all of our to-dos and all of those things. And the psychology behind it is so interesting as to why some people function the way that they do. And it is really personable, allowing someone to come into your house and show you a little bit of dysfunction that's going on in different spaces of your house, and just kind of walking through some of those like mementos and things like that, which we'll get into later on in the podcast. But yes, that all makes sense, Sarah. You talk about creating calm from chaos. So what does that mean to you, and how does organization also play a role in our overall wellness?
I think everyone has a different definition for words that we use. So calm to me is control and order. It's something that I know, with what little control we have in this world and in our lives, the few things that we do have control of is how we act and how we respond to things. And so control to a situation that can feel chaotic is very important to me. Um, how you feel in the space that you live in should be something people really are thinking about. It's four walls that you live inside of for the most part of your life, or the time that you're in that home with the people that you love the most. And so having a calm and controlled environment is just really important, because there's so many unexpected parts of life that can be overwhelming and that we don't have control over. So being able to have that resource and being able to have your home set up in a way that can create, just a feeling of serenity, a feeling of just peace, a feeling of just organization. Those things speak volumes to how we feel and respond and react in the outside world, and in our own home as well. And so, when things are disorganized, people are stressed out. They have maybe higher levels of anxiety. There's decision fatigue because they can't find their things. They don't know where something was left. And so when you're adding those things day in and day out, whether they're incremental or large amounts, everyone starts to feel those ripple effects. And it's such a weight, and it's just mentally, physically, emotionally. When there's disorganization, it balloons into something bigger that maybe isn't being able to be seen, but it's felt. So, where you can have systems in place and where you can have a tidy home, well-planned calendar, if you will, or clear to-do lists, that frees up your mental energy to be able to have meaningful pursuits with things that you're interested in, to be able to have relationships, deeper, meaningful relationships with the people in your home. And it allows you to really just enjoy your space. I mean, something we work really hard to acquire is a home in our lives, and we're taught that, and that's something that we should be celebrating. And I feel like a lot of people don't know how to celebrate that because they just feel like they're stuck, and they feel very overwhelmed in a space that should be feeling free and should come across and bring, a sense of just joy and a space where you can feel comfortable. And it's not about perfection. It's just about making progress. We're not trying to, we're trying to survive. So what's the best ways you can survive in your home? And that's by creating order and organization.
You've been in a lot of people's houses now. How do you feel like our personal habits and the way we operate impact our ability to stay organized?
Personal habits, like you can pretty much put that with any question as far as like what you're doing in your real life. But personal habits are always going to be something that if you don't have good systems set up, and if your personal habits aren't those that are consistent, I think, humans thrive off consistency. And so without having, a daily routine, it can be very basic, but without having that routine, you really have a hard time kind of, making forward progress and being able to celebrate those wins. Something as simple as making your bed in the morning. You can literally just throw a comforter over and 2 pillows and call it good. Or you can get all crazy with it with, chopping the pillows and doing all the fun things. But you've accomplished something right out of the gate. And so that's just a very basic habit that can start the trajectory of what your day looks like. And so I think, instead of feeling this sense of overwhelm, because we're in an environment right now that there's just things were thrown at us so often and so much, and it's overwhelming to come up with what it is that we should be doing. And if you just simplify things and you come up with stuff that's natural to you. So whether it's, time management, whether you're, finding that your decision making is just, it's something that you're challenging something that you're finding that's challenging. Those are things that you want to come back to and say, okay, how can we make this better? How can we make a better habit of this so that we can stop adding additional layers of stress to our daily routine? What can we be doing with the kids in the morning that makes the transition from wake up to out the door? What can we do to improve that? So I think it's looking for, how do you improve your habits? Doesn't mean your habits have to change. Some maybe should to adjust to your environment, but how can you make improvements to your habits? And how can you add maybe just one new habit? And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but something small enough that can allow you to see that forward progress, right? And I think that's important to be able to, it's self-awareness. People that don't sit back and say, okay, how did that last week go? Or how did today go? If you're not doing that on a pretty consistent basis, you're never going to be able to make forward progress in a better way. Whether that's your eating habits or your sleeping habits or your friendship habits, your communication habits, being able to take a step back and say, what can we be doing better? It sets you up for success in anything in your life. So, habits that's a whole nother topic. We could talk about it for hours, but habits are very important into the organizational aspect of your life, and finding those little things like putting your keys exactly in the same place every time. That's a habit. Seems not a big deal, but the amount of hours people spend looking for things, I think it's like something, I don't even remember the quote, but somebody had just pulled this up the other day. It ends up being 36 hours a year that people end up looking for random things in their house. That's almost a whole work week that you're looking for stuff. So power of habit is huge.
That was so good. I feel like there were so many key points coming out of all of what you just said. Okay, so we know that getting organized can feel really good, right? But where do we even start? So some areas of the home that tend to collect a lot of the chaos, and 2 big ones that come to mind are the kitchen and the garage. The kitchen, it's the heart of the home and sees nonstop action, right? Kids in and out grabbing food, dropping your bag after entering the house. And the garage, some people will say, can turn into like a catch-all for everything we don't know what to do with. But so Sarah, where do we start when it comes to organizing our kitchen first and pantry? And what are some things we can do to make that happen?
Yeah. And yes, the heart of the home for sure is your kitchen. You're in there multiple times a day. It's where people come to gather. So it should be a very big focal point of, if anything that you're going to do in your home, the change should be, I think, in your kitchen. Pantries, they vary in sizes and shapes and all kinds of things. And the way people cook also is different, how many family members you have. So really it's going to boil down to what works for you and your family. So, look at what's working and then what's not. So if you're struggling with on Wednesday, you ran out of food again because you forgot to meal plan through the week, then you know that you need to be doing either 2 times a week meal planning or once a week meal planning, really sitting down with your partner or the people in your household and saying, hey guys, this is what the schedule looks like. We've got basketball on Tuesday. We've got dance on Wednesday. So we know we're going to have, quick dinners those nights, and adjusting your lifestyle to what's happening in that season. That's going to be a really key factor, is figuring out what your week looks like. So week to week views are very important. So if you're not doing just a check-in, that should be happening and should start happening. If you can't plan out a meal plan for 7 days because that seems overwhelming, then do it every 3 days. Give yourself a break maybe on that third day that you're doing something like pizza or you're doing something very easy. The second part, after you figured out kind of what your week looks like, is going to your pantry. So you should be shopping from your own pantry. You shouldn't be shopping from the store. You shop from your pantry first, and then you fill in what's missing for those meals by going to the grocery store. Oftentimes I feel that people, because we're not maybe pre-planning as well, is we're filling our pantry with things from the store before we've even thought about what we're making. So then we have, an abundance of the same types of items. Therefore, we've got, 14 cans of the same thing. We're not going through the oldest can. We're eating the newest can. So there's a waste of money there sometimes where we have to throw away expired foods. Your pantry becomes really full if you're not really kind of culling through that, developing what the meals are going to look like, because then all of a sudden you have 14 cans of corn and you're not going to eat 14 cans of corn in 2 weeks. So again, it depends on your size if this is a problem, but it's really just important to kind of look through your pantry to decide, what do we have? What can we be using right now? This saves time and money. And then from there is kind of developing the pantry in a way that makes sense. So just like you would go to a grocery store, things that you're using less likely, or things that they don't really want you to buy because they're like the lower brand items or whatever, those are on the bottom. So things that are heavy, things that you're not using frequently, baking goods, extra cans, overstock, those could be on the bottom of your pantry, or the top. Obviously I try not to do really heavy things up top, but the middle is really where you want to be focusing. So when you think about the middle area, it's where do your eyes go to? So things like that should be, whether you're kind of organizing and categorizing by sides, and then you've got grains and rices and pastas, and then you have all your condiments in your cans, and then maybe the level below that is where you've got kids snacks, because you want to be able to have them be able to see those. You've got your crackers and chips. So I think categorizing is extremely helpful for families. Kind of getting these high level, salty versus sweet, fruit snacks. That's great, but you don't need a whole bin just with fruit snacks and a label for fruit snacks. Maybe it's just, this is what the kids can go to, and it's their kind of sweet treats or whatever you want to call them. But you kind of want to break it down in the pantry as looking at it as what your high use areas are. Things that you're not getting to very often, those can go on the bottom, and possibly in like some type of basket or some container. The idea, of course, is to contain items, right? Pantries have shelves on them and things get lost in shelves. So if you can contain something, whether that's by a cardboard box or plastic bin or whatever thing you can use, you don't have to go to the Container Store and spend thousands of dollars, although if you want to, great. But containing items, right? That will help you be able to see a lot better, like, A, how much do we have left of these types of things? B, how much room are these things taking up? Do we have an abundance of these things? And again, are we running out of something? So, do we have enough of what we need for the week to survive? Again, this is, a very layered approach, and this is hitting very, very, minuscule topics on the pantry, but really think about how your pantry and your kitchen flows so that you can have the most efficient use of that space. And you guys, families can be the most productive in that space with multiple people in there.
When it comes to habits on keeping these spaces clean, because you can reorganize your pantry, have it everything labeled, everything look perfect. And then it's like you're 3 days into the week and things just look chaotic again. So
Yeah.
how often are you encouraging your clients to, like, reorganize a little bit, whether it's once a week, you gotta go in and sweep, make sure the kitchen's cleaned up, the mail and everything is picked through, all of those things. Like, what are the habits that we need to have in place so that we can keep all of those things organized after we've organized it?
So once you've organized it, and this is the key part, once you've organized it, so you do have to do the dirty work first. So, it doesn't magically just happen. So once you've organized it and spent the time to actually take everything out of your pantry, clear the pantry out, treat it like it's a brand new house, move all the things back in after you've categorized, kind of come up with your concept of how you want it to develop, how you want to develop the shelving, what makes sense to you. If you've done the dirty work first, then the maintenance shouldn't be that hard. So if you are also working off of a meal plan concept and you're going in once a week, you should be shopping from your pantry. So you really shouldn't be buying in, overage. Of course, if Costco buyers, totally fine, but plan that out and then make sure your overstock doesn't just live on your pantry shelves, because that's what creates kind of that visual clutter. So overstock, should be living somewhere differently, and pulling out what you're using for that week should be kind of the focal point. So for me, I would say, like, once I've worked with somebody, I will tell them maintenance, depending on, and I can tell a little bit once I worked with the family, like, what kind of style, cleaner uppers they are. I'm sure there's a better word for that, but, are they going to be managing this weekly, or is it more realistic that they're doing it bi-monthly? So I try to really work within what the structure of that family looks like. And then we talk about maintenance that way. In a perfect world, sure, weekly, but also this isn't a perfect world. Life's going to get messy. I would say twice a month minimum. Maybe it's the 1st and 15th. Maybe it's the 1st and 3rd Saturday of every month. But if you let it go past that, it just becomes, again, a really overwhelming task to possibly do, which is what you avoided the whole part of it in the first place. So what we want to do is we want to create consistent patterns of easy maintenance so that you don't get to an avoidance situation in like 2 months. And then all of a sudden you're like, the pantry is a mess again. But I think if everyone, if you can have like a pretty good eye on it and you kind of are calling through, I would say like monthly at a minimum, or monthly at a minimum. That's what I would recommend. Weekly is ideal.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's been seasons of life where you just have that one area of the house and you just keep throwing stuff towards there and like avoiding it. But okay. So now let's move on to the garage. People store lots of different things in their garage, and I'm sure you've seen random things. But how do we use this space to the best of our ability, and maybe even be able to like fit in both of our cars, which would be amazing?
That'd be crazy. I would say 90% of the people do not have cars in their garage, nor do they want them in there. So, and maybe it's just also in Colorado where we live, so the weather's like, it's good enough that cars aren't going to get like totally trashed outside. So I always ask somebody, like, what is the purpose of the garage space? So does your home have a basement? What's your storage space look like inside? Because what ends up happening is, people use their garages as places to store items because they don't have room inside. And the reason they don't have room inside is because they normally have too many things, or they're not using the spaces inside very well. So I do like to get a peek around the house first before I start working in the garage, because sometimes I might realize, like, oh, this thing in the garage doesn't actually belong out here. They just put it out here because there was no room inside. So we start to kind of delineate between what should be really in the home versus what should be in the garage. So I think it's important to understand your garage, yes, is an extension to your home. It can be called you can call it a storage unit, you can call it whatever you want. But to understand what kind of the goal for the garage is an important thing. So kind of being clear about what your goal for the garage is one thing. Understanding what space you might have in your home that you could be taking things back in, or maybe you have things in your home that you're like, this belongs outside. How do I make space outside? So there is a little bit of that back story to it where, sometimes people are like, well, how hard could it be? Just throw some things in a bin. Sure. But if you're really trying to utilize the space the best that you can, you really want to understand what the purpose of your garage is and the things that belong in there. I look a lot at vertical space. So a lot of times what people will do is that we look low, right? Whereas we're like only so many feet tall. Look high, right? Our garages generally have higher ceilings. They have a lot of space around the ceiling that is not being utilized. So think of great storage solutions like shelving or racks, or, they make, the shelves that go up and down. I mean, those are a little pricey, but they're cool. But there's a lot of unique things. And I think that's part of when I go work with people, it's not that they aren't smart and they can't figure it out. They live in their house. And so they can't unthink what they've already seen. So I can come in with a fresh set of eyes and be like, oh my gosh, did you think about this? And they're like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Or I had thought about it, but I didn't even know that was possible. So it's really kind of just like brainstorming and then putting these solutions together, or kind of the spatial concept. But, in the garage, there's a lot of unique tools that can be used to really utilize and to really take advantage of the space that's not probably being used very well. And again, the garage is a dumping zone, right? It's a place people dump their things off where they kind of are like, I don't know if this is a keep or get rid of, but we're just going to put out here for a little bit. So you do have to kind of have some clear rules with your garage and treat it just like a space in your home. It is, I would say, most of the time, the door that people come in and out of more frequently than the front door. So anytime you're leaving your home into a space that feels overwhelming and chaotic, you're leaving your day feeling that way. You see the visual, it's surrounding you. It's a reminder like, gosh, I haven't gotten to the garage again. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do with the 14 bikes we've collected? So it's a constant reminder, even though maybe it's like, pushed down a little bit deeper into the recesses of our mind. But then you come home to the same thing, and you come home from a long day at work, or come home from dropping the kids off, or hanging out with your parents, or whatever you did. And you come back right through that space. And it's the same reminder of stuff and things that you didn't do. And so I think garages are underrated. People don't think about them as being an extension to how they feel. And I know this could be a little bit like, oh my gosh, my feelings, but it is the weight of that mental clutter. Everyone handles that differently. Females definitely much more than males, but it is a sense of just like, what are we going to do with that space? And it normally is overwhelming because they're the bigger items, like, sporting equipment, or, tools, things like that. And so I always tell people, figure out what you guys need and what you're using right now. Get rid of the rest of the stuff. Do a garage sale if you want. Donate your sporting equipment to a youth program that needs new basketballs and soccer balls or whatever. There are many organizations out there that would benefit from many of your items. So if they're not being utilized, move them on. Let them go live somewhere else and have a fresh start. But don't let them just bog down that mental and physical weight of what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis.
So yes, I can totally relate, especially like having, we have 3 kids. So every kid like has a basketball, every kid has a soccer ball, and it just starts to accumulate. So what we found on Amazon was those like vertical hooks that you can put on your wall to organize it. And then it also keeps it visible. So if it's all in a big bin, you can't really see, how many basketballs do we really have, versus when it was on the wall. Now it's like, okay, each, we really only need 2 basketballs, 2 soccer balls, those kinds of things. And it keeps it visible so you can kind of keep track of it. But yeah, and kids stuff is a lot. So let's dive into kids stuff, because parents are constantly battling stuff, whether we have toys, clothes, school papers, art projects. And what's the key to keeping that under control?
Less stuff. I mean, it's going to sound like I'm repeating myself, and I'm not telling people to be minimalist. I'm not saying that. But it is, it's an abundance of things. We are just in a consumeristic world. We've been brought up that way. We've been trained like that. It's no different for our children. And so a lot of our habits, maybe more of our bad ones, they, trickle down into our family, and they trickle down into our lifestyle. And so, I think limiting what your kids have is very important. Kids don't thrive off of having more choices. That's a situation where they feel stressed out and overwhelmed, and that's why like the Montessori concept for children's toys is efficient, and it's productive for children to have more creativity and play, where they only have choices of 3 or 4 things in like categories. They don't need the art set along with the 500 reams of paper, along with the 75 different, crafting items, that they don't even know where to start with that because it's too many choices. And, of course, my kids had those things. They were all beautifully labeled and in perfectly amazing bins. And by the way, I'm definitely not like a Pinterest person either, but I had it all organized. But then I didn't also want them to play with it because I didn't want them to make a mess of it. So my controlling issue was that more than having them have 2 to 3 things to just be creative with, to have access to, that they wanted. And so I think for parents, it's just really important to understand, kids are your kids. You can tell from a pretty young age what they're a little bit more inclined to be enjoying. Are they a little bit more on the artistic side? Are they more on the musically inclined side? Are they more engineering? You're going to find those things out pretty quickly. And so generally their toys are going to be geared more towards that. Their interests are going to be geared more towards that. It doesn't mean that you need 4,000 of those things though. I think it's just being really thoughtful and conscientious about what you're, putting in their laps to make decisions with. Their brains aren't quite developed yet, as you know. And so you're giving them the choices that we're contemplating. That's overwhelming. So again, I'm always going to go back to less. To solve that problem is to have less things. And some people are like, you know what? I love all these things. These are things my kids play with. These are things, these have been gifts. These are beautiful things. That is also great. But maybe you rotate your toys. Maybe you decide that this month they can go pick from the 4 bins that they have and they can pick 3 new toys out. I mean, there's so many creative ideas to just remove the additional options. And I think that's really what you should be thinking about, is how do you simplify the choices for your children? And therefore, how does that simplify your pickup? You're maintaining a lot of this, and most kids aren't picking up after themselves at certain ages. And so how much pickup do you want to be doing? Are you spending all Saturday cleaning up all the toys that they just threw around the whole entire house, and the dress up stuff and the crafts? And if you want to, great. I would imagine that maybe you want to spend some other time doing something else, other than just trailing your children around picking up their toys. So also think about how it's helping you, right? And limiting the amount of time that you're spending maintaining their stuff. And I think the one thing I find with parents that is hard is we all have great intentions for our children. So to give them all the things to try and to see what's going to work, and all the abundance is just, our love is just there, right? And buy one of those things is by way of gifts, or items. And it's great. And I love that. But it really is adding stress to both sides of the park. It's the kids are stressed out with the too many options. They don't enjoy it enough to even spend the time or energy to try to complete the task or get into the creative moment because they're just distracted by something else. So, think of it, we live in a world of distraction, and how can you kind of get your kids to refocus a little bit? And then also for yourself, you're refocusing your time and energy by not chasing plastic toys around. It's kind of the easiest way to put it. There's so many unique ways though to just organize kids' toys and organize the house. And this is also dependent on, again, the number of children you have, boys, girls, boys, right? When birthdays fall, that's a weird thing, but if birthdays fall in the winter, are they getting double the toys with that plus holiday gifts? How are grandparents gifting? I mean, there really are so many ways to look at it, and to kind of come up with some solutions and kind of come up with some ways that say, hey, mom, thanks so much for getting, Betsy the toy every time you see her, but like, let's hold off on this for a little bit. And instead, I'd rather you just take her to get her nails done. So there's different ways you can approach those topics. And there's like 1,500 ways to come up with great storage solutions and ideas for playrooms. I mean, I can't get into all of them, but if you have like a specific thing you want me to talk about.
Well, I was just thinking, like, we have like a kitchen, right, with toy food. And just like, we don't need 150 pieces of food because when the food bin comes out, 150 pieces are now on the floor,
Yeah.
So maybe reduce, we don't need to completely get rid of all of our food pieces, but maybe we like narrow it down to between 20 and 30. So there's a couple of meals that they can make, but as a parent, it's not a ton of work to pick up when they're like, I want to play with the kitchen stuff, So thinking through those kinds of things. So that's kind of one of the things that stuck to me when you were talking was maybe I need to, or like so many, I have girls, so many of their things are little, like all of the little pieces that end up everywhere. So maybe it's like, maybe we get rid of some of the little pieces and stick to more of the bigger pieces.
I will say I haven't, I am a proponent for letting the Barbie shoes go. I am a 100%. They will maybe play with like 3% of all those little gadgets that come because they're annoying to put on. They're hard to put on. You forget about them.
They are always at the bottom of my bin.
Yes. I would stick with the clothes. I would stick with the really cool accessories, and maybe it's like the suitcase or like the roller skate, something unique to make the Barbie or whatever the doll is something different. I personally just get rid of all the other small pieces. It's just, again, not everyone does that. And if I'm working with a family and they're like, dude, we really love all the small pieces, I'm like, say, great. Then they're going to go in a bag. And this bag is where all the small pieces live. And when you're playing with them and the girls are done, they can put the small pieces back in the bag. So if you want to keep all the stuff, awesome. But how are you storing the stuff is the bigger question. So, you can have 1,000 toys, but if they're all just jammed in one toy box, that's overwhelming. So if you're going to keep things or whatever you're going to keep or whatever your limits are, it's important to think about how you're storing the items. So are they out visually? Are they in all of the bedrooms? Are they taking up your entire house? They shouldn't be. It is your house. Your kids get to live in there, luckily for them. I mean, obviously you want them to enjoy the space as well, but they don't need to take over your home. So designate spaces for toys, designate times or areas for certain toys to be used, whatever that case may be. I get kids involved at a very early age. I'll go in and work with kids and I kick parents out of the room. I'm like, you can't be in here. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, you leave and we're going to work on this together. Because it's a parent to kid, like you're just going to butt heads. But get your kids involved at an early age. Don't walk around picking up everything after them. That's not going to help them as they get older, learning how to manage things and learning how to organize themselves or tidy up themselves. So you're really doing a disservice if you're just constantly trailing your children and picking up all of their items. But creating good, sorting skills, that can be a fun task to do together. Creating zones that just they're just clutter-free zones, saying, hey, there's no toys in this room. There's no toys on this area. Or once you're done on this tabletop, everything needs to go back into this bucket that we've created. And the bucket's not pretty because it's all hidden in the bucket, but the bucket's off the desk. So you can come up with, different ways to kind of handle projects or things that they're doing. You mentioned the thing about the kids' paper that comes in. That's a big thing, especially when they're little, because it's so damn cute, right? Like, how do you get rid of anything that they've touched with paint? And I just, I start to talk to parents. I'm like, well, did they do it or did the teacher do it? Is it their handprint? That shows that their handprint. That's awesome. So just a marker that they just like kind of dabbed on the paper and just went like this, right? Everyone's going to have difference of what is important to them. But I always tell people for every year, you should have a bin that you put that current year's artwork in, right? You might pull stuff out and put it on the wall, which I highly suggest at least displaying something so you can enjoy the things that they're doing at the time, rather than putting them in a basket and then 7 years down the road, 10 years down the road, being like, that was so cute. They're not going to find it as cute as you do. So enjoy the pieces at the moment, right? Get one of those wow, I can't think, the picture frames that you can just slide the pictures in and take them out. You can, put 15 different pictures in there and just rotate them. But use what they're making right now. And then you kind of have to decide, at the end of that year. I tell people not to make decisions right away if they're not good at making emotional decisions. Some people are keepers and some people are not. The keepers, I tell, put it in a bin. Don't even go through it right now. Take out the pieces you want to display. The end of the year, when the kid is past first grade, kindergarten, second, go back through that bin and then separate your piles into keeps and toss, because you're going to find a lot are toss. At the moment that they come in, it is very much a keep, because it is at that time. It's so time, sensitive. You're not going to make a good decision then. Wait to make the decision at the end of the year. Then at the end of the year, clear out your bucket, start the new bucket for the next year. Keep your keep items in a box that is their keepsake, their formal keepsake. So you're just kind of, separating that process, but you're not taking every single piece of paper, putting it in a bin for long term, because you will end up having 3-4 bins worth of paper that no one really wants at 18 years old. Your kids aren't going to really want it. So pick the prized possessions and go with those. But there's a lot of really creative ways to deal with the kids' toys, memory boxes, things like that. But really, most importantly is, just limit your items, so a 1 in, 1 out rule. I'm sure you've heard of that. One thing comes in, one thing goes out. So, you can start instilling those types of things in with the kids as they receive gifts, or, for birthday parties, you could say, hey, we have so many books and toys already. Why don't we ask people to donate to an organization that you are really fond of? You love the animal, the Humane Society. Let's have people donate there. So you can do so many things that don't just revolve around gift giving and consuming. Some ideas.
Those are so good. And yes, the emotional attachment, it can be really hard to let go of things. And I have stuff come in and, I try and maybe narrow it down to like 5 pieces of artwork or whatever, 5 school pieces throughout the whole entire year. So at the end, they're still going to have like 40 sheets of whatever it is that I saved, which, when they're 18, they might be like, Mom, why did you save this? Because I don't need it anymore. But that's their decision at that point. Okay. So we've talked a lot about like the population that has kids, but let's talk about a little bit different of a population that we might have here in Erie. And it's those individuals that are helping aging parents get organized. So what are some common organizing challenges that arise as parents age, and how can we support them there?
I think the hardest part is, as our parents age, we kind of take on now that parenting role. We start to say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I don't think we should do that. Or the roles start to reverse a bit. And then there's a time frame where that's an awkward transition. It can be in some families, where there's resistance from, obviously our parents aren't wanting to give up independence. Our parents aren't feeling like they're at a place where they need somebody to come in and help them out. There's a lot of pride involved as human beings. And so, having things, be taken away, and you start to see a reduction in just your physical limitations, right? Like, I think the biggest factor is preparing and talking about the preparation before things get bad. And by bad, I mean before someone has a fall, or before someone loses maybe, full cognition, or, it's actually having real conversations with your parents and saying, hey, Mom, Dad, how can we set you guys up so that you have the next 5 to 10 years that you can enjoy this home in a safe environment? So safety is kind of the number one thing. I think that is an easier way to approach the topic, because it's not about them. You're not pointing a finger at them that they're doing something wrong. I think that there's a lot that can come up emotionally with that. When we start saying, you should be doing these things, you aren't doing these things the right way. No one likes to hear that. So I think if you can approach a topic from a broad perspective, I've done some research. These are some things that, that have been suggested as limitations, as physical limitations start to become an issue, or I've, cognitively, I've the forgetfulness starts to come up, you can start broaching that topic and saying, hey, I really think we can come up with some practical things to do in your home so that you can thrive in here as long as you can. That's our goal. Our goal is for you to be here independently for as long as possible. And these are some of the things I think we might want to talk about doing. You want to involve them in that process. You don't want to tell them what you're doing. You don't want to tell them why your idea is the best idea in the world. You want to involve them in the process. No different than you and I, now, or even at work, when you come up with an idea, no one wants to be told what to do. You want that to be kind of a collaboration. Now, easier said than done. There are obviously relationship, dilemmas here, personal ways in which we've communicated. Our family dynamics are always quite interesting. So, to me, that might sound like easy because I have a great relationship with my parents, but to somebody else who has had a strained relationship with their parents, these topics are going to be a little bit more challenging. And so, it's about coming in with respect. It's coming in with a sense of togetherness. Like, how can we work on this together rather than me leading, the charge here? What is best for you? Asking them a lot of, questions about them. How can we make this better for you versus I think this would be better for you. So again, the psychology on this, if you're ever in question, just start digging into best ways to address, a parental issue, in this way. But if we're going back a little bit more to the safety aspect, that is the number one thing. I think that's the easiest approach because it's not a personal attack, or it cannot feel like a personal attack. Mm-hmm. And so also things like physical limitation, that's huge, right? Like, I mean, I'm already having issues just bringing my arm up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. So if you see those things, you can say, hey, Mom, I noticed that cupboard, you guys have a lot of things up there. Let's bring that down. You don't need to be reaching that high. You don't need to have things up that high. Let's bring some stuff down. Let's rearrange some things to make it easier for you. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be bending down either that far. Let's bring some stuff up. Let's get some rolling cabinets. Let's get a rolling cart. Let's come up with some other solutions. Let's maybe use the back of the door to hang stuff on versus these cupboards that you have to get on your hands and knees to get to the bottom of. Like, come up with some, unique solutions that can be helpful. Like, who wants to get on their hands and knees at 70 or 80 years old to find something in the back of a cupboard? I don't want to do that now. Mm-hmm. So finding some unique solutions to just helping with just the physical aspect of things. How are they storing their items? It's no different than how we store our items here. But if that's not been something that they've been doing their entire life, and we start to see, memory starts to go. I mean, I can't remember something from 2 days ago, right? And I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. So I can't imagine what at 80 I'm going to be like. So how do we create better consistency for them where they're going to be able to say, oh, I know this is where all my medication lives. These are my medication pill boxes. I know that this is my system and routine. Again, we go back to habits. Mm-hmm. If our parents don't have good habits to start with, how can we help start creating them for them? How can we help make that time frame in their lives so that they can thrive in that fourth season of life? Creating visual memory or visual cues, is consistent, routines, using technology. Like, what are some things that you can do to kind of bridge that gap for them and also make it so that their living situation is comfortable, but also safe? I keep using that word because it is very much used in the elderly population.
Mm-hmm. Are they usually receptive when you use the word safe?
Well, no, of course not, because,
they think they can still do it all.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like an 18-year-old when you're like, drive safe. And they're like, oh, what do you think? I'm just going to go try to hit a car. And I'm like, well, no, but also you're 18. So you haven't been driving for very long, right? So just someone at 75, 80, they're like, well, I've been walking forever. What do you mean I'm going to have a problem walking? Well, it's like, we should probably pick up the rugs, Mom. There's just, it's an unnecessary thing. Like, why would we keep them here? It's just a potential tripping hazard, right? Mm-hmm. So there's going to be resistance 100%. But I think if you can keep focusing on, again, what it is for them versus you, I think that can help alleviate some of that tension that sometimes comes along with that. And just, again, I think if your parents' goal is to live as independently as they can for as long as possible, which I believe is what most people want to do, they don't want to have to go to a home if they don't have to. That is, again, this is the goal. This is how we keep you in this goal. This is how we keep you successful with this goal. And these are the ways we have to do this. We have to get rid of some items. You have too much furniture in here. We need to come up with better solutions on how we're, where are your items being stored? So it's probably, a tough conversation to have, but it is one that should be had. And the sooner you can have it, even if I have younger parents and I talk to them about it, we're very open about it. I'm like, hey guys, so when things start to go, like, we're going to come in and we're going to start working towards, reducing, whatever the case might be. Right. My parents have already started decluttering. So my mom's already gone through the space downstairs to go, and she sends us pictures. Do you guys want these things? Nope. Do you want these things? Because she's been holding on to them for us. What I hate to see is when people get to the point where they have to move to an assisted living home and all of a sudden their house has to go on the market. And all of a sudden they're out of the home because they fell and they broke a hip. And now they're permanently in a home that their kids are now having to go to their house, pick out the things that they want. And then the rest of the stuff, they're like, I don't know what to do with all this. Mm-hmm. I hate seeing that because no one took the time or energy before. Obviously, none of us know when things are going to happen, but they didn't take the time or energy before to try to declutter some things, try to go through some of those sentimental items together. I mean, I always tell people, I'm a proponent of this. If I'm sitting there with a box of items that I want to give my kids, but I'm waiting for the right time, like when I'm old and before I have to move to a retirement home, I shouldn't wait that long. I should be telling them and giving them those things at a much earlier time so that they can A, enjoy them, B, I can tell them the story, C, they can decide if they want to keep it or not. But we've had the chance to say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this phone and all these things that came along with it. And the kids understand why you kept the item, and they understand the value and the story behind it. And you were able to transact that thing to them. And you were able to see that they could receive that gift. Whereas what happens is people won't do that, or they've passed away unexpectedly, or they've gone to a home and they've lost the opportunity to explain those stories and the reasons why they kept those things or why they were so important. And then those stories are lost. And then the history around that is lost. And then the person that has acquired these items doesn't know why they have them or what they're for. Mm-hmm. And then we go through a sense of everyone tosses it and they just hire dumpsters and throw it all away, which is just like, or they keep it because they have a sense of guilt. So mm-hmm. How do we meet in the middle? How do we find a better compromise to that? And I think, again, talking to your parents as soon as possible about these topics is going to be it will set you the wheels in motion and make things a lot easier during that transition, I think.
Yeah, that's really good. I had a grandma who, she's still alive, but she made books for all of her children and grandchildren. And she handed them out, 5 years ago because she wanted to be there while we experienced going through these books that she had collected and had put together for us. So that was cool. So getting to experience it together, getting to walk through what's important, what's not important. Yes, all of those things are really great advice.
Yeah. And that's so special to be able to do that with your grandma, to hear the stories and share that. Mm-hmm. And as far as just, things that can help them, again, like I said, I mean, it's going to vary based on, the age, their current health situations, where they are mentally, physically. But, again, it's important to start early and start slow. They're at a slower pace. They are not moving as quickly as we are. So their sense of urgency is different than ours. And I think mm-hmm. being aware of that and not coming in with such a kind of a forcefulness is really going to have a better result long-term for what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think it's just really important to remember it is their things, and those are things that are important to them. And even if you don't see a value in whatever it is that they've held on to or the items that they have, that's not for you to judge, and that's not for you to make that decision on. You can guide them through that. That's exactly what I do in my job. I have no judgment on people's items. Your less is a little different than mine, or your definition on clutter is different than my definitions. And so, going in with an approach of openness and again, respect for them and their items and their story is going to be very important. And the things you can learn from them during that time is pretty cool. We don't really ask our parents questions as we're growing up, where they're just our parents. And then, I think everyone has an epiphany moment when you realize, oh my God, my parent is also a person, and a person went through the same things I've gone through. And what did they do during that time? So it can be a unique opportunity to either rekindle relationships or deepen relationships. So try to treat it as a really unique project and an opportunity, if you have the ability to do that.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for all of those suggestions and bringing your insight. As we look ahead at the new year, what are some exciting developments or things that you're doing that you and your business have planned for 2025?
So, and this, I just did a seminar at the Erie Library last month. And so one of my big pushes this year is more community outreach. And so I did a free seminar last month. It was an hour long. I had 2 other speakers come, and we're trying to find topics. So it's about health and lifestyle management. And so, I talked about the pantry, and I had a nutritionist come in and talk about how to read labels and things like that. And then I had someone that owns a food prepping company talk about, how to prep meals and how to make, food, meal cooking a little bit more simplified. I'm trying to find things that I think would be useful for everyday life, things that you or I or any other working parent or not parent, just in this busy season of life, what can be valuable? So one of my big things right now is, again, community outreach. So I'll be having another seminar April 1st. We're talking about cleaning products and the types of things to look for as far as toxins inside of your cleaning products, the plastics, things of that nature. I'll be talking about how to clean utility rooms, laundry rooms to better suit your needs. And then I'll have another third installment. I don't know when, because it's kind of now getting into end of school, but I would like to also do these in the fall. And so I really would love I'd love to give back to the community in ways that can just help one person, even with one simple idea that they're like, didn't even think about that. I'm going to implement that. It's not going to be a game changer, but it could be a moment changer, enough that it then propels you to the next thing. So I'm hoping there's like a snowball effect to this. So that's one of my big things this year is community outreach and giving back to the community in a way that is beneficial. And then the other thing is I'm really focusing on my relocation concierge move management part of my business. I do everything in the home. I do organizing in the home. I do organizing for people's lives. I do all the things, but moving is a whole nother kind of arm to my business. And moving is one of the top 10 most stressful things you'll do in your life. So I love to be involved in a stressful situation and try to make it better. So I'd like to go into a house before people move, instead of packing up all of your things. What things do we not need to pack up? So a really deep decluttering moment before a move is ideal if we have time. I help with packing, and then I really love the back end part of it, which is the unpacking. So how often do we move into a house and we're just overwhelmed and stressed, and we just take things out of boxes and throw them into cupboards and put them on shelves without really maybe thinking about the efficiency or the streamline that we could be using in that space. So kitchens, again, are number one. So really kind of focusing on that. I would like to build a team for those particular jobs so that I can get them done quicker, as I tend to do a lot of things myself or with 1 or 2 people. So I'm really looking to grow my business as well. So those are my 2 big things.
Awesome. Well, those are some exciting things. And I love that you're pairing the community outreach with some education. Like, what kind of ingredients do you not want in your food? What kind of ingredients do you not want in your cleaning supplies? And I feel like also you're moving component of the business is also huge. And we have people that are either moving to Erie or they're moving out. So just kind of being able to help them simplify that process. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned a lot about organizing, and I feel like I'm a pretty organized person, but I definitely can improve my processes and just, simplifying things, because less mess equals less stress. So,
Amen, girl. Amen. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
yes, we'll have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Erie Wellness Podcast. I truly appreciate you being a part of this journey. If you've loved today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. For more daily wellness inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, be sure to follow me on Instagram at the Erie Wellness Podcast. I can't wait to connect with you again soon.